You have an idea. You want to tell it to the world, but you don't know where to start. That's where Anchor comes in. They have the tools for you to edit, produce, and record your idea right from your phone or computer. It's the easiest way to reach and grow your audience. They publish for you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms. And to top it all off, they match you with advertisers so you can earn from your passion and your wonderful idea. So tell me, what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and follow your dream.
Thanks for tuning in again, everyone, to Disruptive Adventism. Today we're going to be talking about life abroad. You know, how is it to be living for a year abroad? We have with us a special guest. His name is Jonathan Rodney, and he'll be sharing with us a little bit of his experience on his life for a year when he went to Germany. So we have him here with us. So how's it going, Jonathan?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for allowing me to record you and just, you know, have a great time. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, where you're from, what are you doing right now, and, you know, where did you go last year, specifically in Germany?
Okay, yeah. So, like you said already, my name is Jonathan Rodney. I am 24 years old. I am from the Chicago area. I am a student currently at Southern Adventist University. I'm studying music education for secondary ed, and I'm also doing international studies with a German emphasis. And like you said, I was in Germany last year at Friedensau Adventist University, or Theologische Hochschule Friedensau.
There it is. Probably I will say that one day, you know, like if you can teach me how to say that. But tell us a little bit more about what was that experience. I mean, I'm pretty sure you traveled throughout that time period, but what was the shock getting to a new country? Like, you know, walk me through your year at Friedensau.
Okay, yeah.
And maybe by the end of the episode, I'll learn how to say it in German.
Sure. So yeah, I went to Germany last year because of my international studies major. They require you to go. And so I went last September. And surprisingly enough, Germany isn't super different from America in a lot of ways. But in the ways of like being very, very direct, that was very, very different for me. Like if somebody had an issue, like you would see them talking about it in that very moment in front of like all the people around them. And it wasn't a big deal. Like nobody really, I don't know, it didn't really matter. But, you know, being an American, that's like, it doesn't fly, you know? So I was like, whoa, like that's so weird to see. The food there was also really interesting. I don't know, it was like even going to places that I knew, you know, in America, like if I went to a Burger King or a McDonald's or something, like it was so different. And I had to get really used to that. Like even buying candy sometimes, like I was like, oh, I see some Skittles, and I would eat them. I'm like, oh, like these are not Skittles. I mean, they are Skittles, you know, in Germany, but like they don't add certain things to like the Skittles to make them taste the way that we have them here in the States, and just all the things. So I was like, wow, like this is really weird.
So things taste to a certain degree different because of regulations or different things that they have.
Right. So they have like no artificial flavoring at all.
So they're healthy Skittles.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
And it was like, what? Like this is gross. But so that was interesting. I don't know, just like seeing stuff like that. Church culture is different there in Germany, and especially in different parts of Germany. Like the place that I was at in Germany was more liberal, and like I know in the South, like they're very much more like conservative. Like they're very much more like traditional in their beliefs. So just like being able to see that, going like traveling all throughout Germany and going to like churches and things, like that was also really interesting. I don't know, just like it was cool, but it was like different. It was very different.
What are some of the main things that were more relatable to you while you had your experience there? I don't know if like I think of Adventism as a whole. It's a very multicultural, very international faith, religion, or denomination, as you may want to call it, movement, as I prefer calling it. Were some of the things similar? Was church life similar as well? Maybe you can share on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was pretty much similar. I mean, you went to church, they had Sabbath school there, and it was like a very healthy discussion. People were very open-minded and trying to understand each other. We sang hymns. I mean, obviously they were German hymns, but I mean, it was still the same. Or like there was also praise and worship music, and I don't know, the sermons were very deep. And it felt like I was still, at home. It was just that it was in a different language. And so I had to get used to that. Sometimes I would wear, like, they used to have these, like, headphones where, like, if you wanted to get a translation, like in English or whatever, then you could wear those. And so I wore those, like, the first few weeks. But other than that, I mean, once the year progressed, it felt more like home, even though it was in German, because I was like, I already had been able to understand by that point. So,
do you think that, kind of like from a spiritual sense, you had a different experience from your English spiritual side to your? I mean, like I personally have a different feel when I go to Spanish church. I feel like I go back to my childhood. Rather than when I'm in an English church, where I feel like that's been more of my adult life, like, being here in the States, like, when I communicate concepts in English spiritually, it's very different than the Spanish conversation that I have in a spiritual sense. Is that something that you experience as well?
Yeah. So like there would be some services like in English there, and I felt, of course, really, really at home with that. And so like that was great. But I thought what was really cool about the German church services was that I was learning it kind of like all over again. Because like, we hear it in English, I mean, at least for me, and it just seems like really redundant. But it was like fresh when I heard it in German. I was like, oh, like that's a different way of like phrasing it. Or because, like if I read in the Bible, if I compare it to like the English like verses, it's the same, but it's like the wording is like just slightly different, and you're like, whoa, like, and it kind of opens your mind a little bit more to like what the meaning could be. Just like how like, if we were to read something in Spanish and like compare it to the English, like, yeah, like it's around the same, but it's like, oh, like that's a new way of like thinking about it, or saying something, regarding religion. So
I think you're pointing towards the idea that the language, it uses maybe a different word that has a different connotation, different meaning. It unravels like a different area of your life as a whole. So yeah, I've experienced that definitely, and I can definitely kind of like resonate with what you're saying. One area that I'm kind of curious about, like, and maybe some people that are listening, like they're considering this idea of traveling abroad, or maybe like doing a year like you, maybe someone in college. Do you recommend it? Do you think that's a good thing for people to do? What are some of the lessons that you learned throughout, this time of learning a new language and being in a different culture?
Yeah, I would totally recommend it. This is actually not my first time leaving America for a year. I was also on SM. But I think that, especially with ACA, just being able to like because a language already has so much culture in itself, but like being in that space of where it's just all over the place, and like you have to understand, like you have to really dive into like what's happening. I think that's a really amazing experience, and like it taught me a lot about like how I wanted to be shaped as a person. Because just like how I was saying earlier with like different cultural differences of like how they would interact with each other. I had never really seen that in the States. And so seeing that in another culture, I was like, I really like that. And I don't see why it would be wrong to bring that back, to the States. Like, I think that, I don't know, there are good things everywhere, and why not share them?
Can you tell me one of those good things or things that you kind of learned from a German culture that's like, let me import that to my American lifestyle, for example?
Yeah. So in Germany, they view friendships very differently than here in the States. What I mean by that is if you're going to be friends with a German, it's going to take a while for them to like actually say that. So I got there in September, but a lot of my friends weren't saying that we were friends until like around this time, like end of November, early December, because they really wanted to make sure that like I was going to be a good fit for them. They wanted to make sure that they were going to be okay with like me being in their inner circles. Because Germans, like they do have like quite a bit of friends, but like if you know that person like as their friend, like you know that they're like really close, like they're inseparable almost to a certain degree. Whereas I feel like here in the States, people are so quick to say like, oh, like you're my best friend, and like they've only known you for like 2 hours. You know, it's like it's really different. And so like I really appreciated that, because even though I felt kind of shocked at first in the beginning, like, oh, like these people don't even like, I'm not even their friend. Like, you know, I was kind of sad a little bit, but then I was like, now looking back, like they were doing the right thing to make sure that, you know, we were going to like actually get along and be like, you know, solid. And so like, for me, I want to implement that as well. I don't want to just meet people and say, oh, like they're my friend, and like I don't really know that much about them. Like they wanted to actually take time to know people and make sure that was a good thing. So
make sure that you're doing a foundation for that relationship.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, oh, well, we're all friends, we're all everything.
Yeah.
It's more important to get deep into maybe keep it as a lasting friendship.
Absolutely.
Because I guess in America I resonate and I kind of think about what you're saying is that, yes, you know, people do say like, oh, you're my friend, like, you know, come here. But then they may not be your actual friend, and, you know, you just lose touch and then you lose that friendship. But I guess it's more like a strong bond when you say you're friends,
right?
In Germany.
It's like I'm trapped, if you will, with them. So it's cool.
In your time in Germany, did you have other travel experiences as well? With the program, did the program encourage you, or did they have tours or anything like that?
Yeah, so I got to go to several places in Germany with ACA. We also went to Austria in Salzburg. I guess that's how you would say it in English. I forget how to say all these names in English now. But yeah, Salzburg. We went there and we got to see a lot of like Holocaust places, like a lot of concentration camps, and we got to go like to other museums. We got to see a lot of awesome landscapes, and we got to just practice German all the time. So it was really nice. Yeah.
Did that museum experience, or, you know, like just the whole idea of, you know, being there, you know, where some of these atrocities occur, you know, did that give you kind of like a different appreciation, or maybe like a different side of the picture, you know, being from the American side, that is the Allied side, the winning side, quote unquote, you know, where you're in a nation, the quote unquote losing side. Did that kind of shape your idea of history, or, you know, I don't know how you interacted with those?
Yeah, I thought it was really, really awesome. Yet sad as well, of course, to like be able to see all of that. Just because, like, you know, it's just really somber, because I mean, even now, like when I talk to my friends about stuff like that, like they even go along to say that they're not even proud to be Germans. Like they can't be prideful of like saying that they're German just because of like this stuff that happened. And I'm like, wow, that's like such a different view, because like, you know, here in the States, we're like, oh yeah, like we're American and, you know, whatever. And it's like my friends will never have that ability to do that, because like they are still so apologetic for everything, and they weren't even there, you know, like it wasn't even them, and they would have never done that. But yeah, it's just like, it's really interesting. Like, and I learned a lot, like when I was over there, like just being at all of the places and reading all the displays and seeing like all of the monuments for all of the Holocaust victims and things. Like it was really very sombering to like to see. So
when you mentioned that idea of being apologetic, even for something that you didn't do, it kind of reminds me of a harder conversation that we have here in the United States for example, the conversation of slavery, you know, where different people will be like, well, I wasn't there. You know, that was my ancestors, or like, you know, and it kind of, I don't know, triggers something in my head to think about this. It's interesting to see that Germans are still apologetic for something that happened, I mean, rather recently, less than 100 years ago. And, you know, slavery is also 150 years around there. You know, it's kind of interesting to see the different reactions. Do you get that picture that, you know, this kind of like apologetic is like mainly because, well, I guess they're more connected with that history, or like they are more forced, they're taught that history. I don't know if in your classes you were kind of reminded. I don't know how it works over there.
Yeah, I think their everyday life kind of reminds them, and that's really like, that's a big deal. Like I think that they are just taught like never to forget. Like they don't ever want to repeat history in that light. And there are some people who are still like, I mean, I don't know. Some people say that there's like a Nazi party over in Germany. It's not necessarily so, but I could kind of see where they're getting at. But I mean, that's like probably less than 1% of the population in Germany. So like, it's not like a thing. But other than that, everybody, I mean, like how you said, like in our classes, they would talk about it all the time. Just kind of like, you know, hey, like this is what happened and we're really sorry about it. Like we're never going to go that route again. And, you know, even in their national anthem, like they have taken out like 2 verses, I believe, because like, I guess Hitler had used it during his time in Germany and stuff like that. And so people are just like, no, like we have to literally not forget, because they know the words, but they're just like, we will never go that way again. Like, and so it's really different. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you get to experience other, I mean, I assume that you were not the only American there or the only international student. How was that, you know, interacting with, I mean, here in America, we have that. We have people that come from other countries, but they kind of get unraveled into the American lifestyle. Did you get kind of like intertwined with other people, learn their customs, and were all of you kind of shaped into the German lifestyle? Or was it like, I don't know, individualized? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there were a few other Americans with me, and then we also studied with some Russians, some Ukrainians, a Hungarian. There was a guy there from Uruguay. There was a guy there also from Madagascar, Eritrea. So we had like a good turnout for like the ACA program in terms of like international students. We definitely got to learn a lot about each other's cultures, because first of all, I had never ever met anybody from Madagascar or Eritrea. I didn't even know Eritrea was a country. Like, so, yeah. And if you didn't know where it is, it's right next to Ethiopia. Anyway, so I got to like learn a little bit of like their languages. Like my friend would like write my name out in his language, and I was like, that's so cool. And like, got to learn a lot about like, you know, just stuff like that. And like, we got to compare and contrast Hungarian a lot, because I guess Germany kind of had some ties over there. And so like their language isn't super similar to Germany, and German, but there are like a lot of words that just have like one letter change, or like maybe one letter has like an accent on it. Cause like Hungarians use like, you know, the accents and things, and like umlauts as well. But I was just like, this is so interesting, like being able to like see this, intertwine and also like just learning about other people. But then we were all coming together like to learn like this German. And, I think that was really beautiful. And like, it was also really cool because some of the people in our ACA group didn't know any English. And so we had to speak German to each other, because like I didn't know their other language, you know, like it could be Russian or it could be this or that. And so we had to like literally speak to each other in that way. And like, I was like, that's so interesting how like none of us speak this language, well, at the time, like fluently, but this is what we have to use in order to communicate with each other. Like, there's no other way, because you don't know my language, I don't know yours. And so I thought that was really beautiful, like that it was able to bring people from who knows where, like, together.
You talked about this kind of like unity that, it's kind of like part of the conversation right now, especially within Adventism, that it's like the whole being united, and like, then there's, responses, videos all over the place. But how do you see that community kind of like the church, or maybe like another part of culture out there besides language that was kind of unifying you at the time? Like, what were kind of some of the common grounds that you found besides language, again, with these people?
I would also say beliefs. Just the way that we like view God and how we worship God and how we like love God, that I think was a common denominator for a lot of us. And yeah, there were people who had differing views, but it was never to the point where it was like contradictory to anybody or anything. So like we were still able to like talk about it. I was able to learn from them, and like I was like, oh yeah, like maybe that is like a good thing to think about, like when I'm talking about this, and if I were to share something, they'd be like, oh, I never thought about it like that. And so I think unifying in like the differences, I think that was like probably the biggest thing. But yeah, besides language, I think that was like,
I mean, it's good to know, because I think it's very interesting how, like, as human beings, we have different approaches, and different ideas that really, like, our beliefs, the way that we see each other as like our humanity, towards one another. And I mean, in this case, language kind of unified the experience, the struggle of learning something new together and communicating in a broken way at first. And maybe after a couple of months, like, oh, I'm fluent now. Like, we can just talk with everybody else. Right. So it's really interesting to see that. And, a really good example of that, unity can come from like the different voices,
absolutely
around. That's awesome. Maybe one more question before we kind of start, finishing the podcast is like, how was worship? How was the experience of maybe like worship with other people? Like you kind of said that you were kind of in like a more liberal area within Adventism. That means just a little bit more progressive, maybe some drums or anything. I don't know how it is over there. But how was worship? Was it very similar to the American experience in the sense of like very traditional, or maybe super like, I can think of, I guess, elevation worship, or like, things like that. What was it? Where did the spectrum kind of like lay?
Yeah. So I would say it was kind of in the middle. I think people like the Germans were really willing to meet people where they were, and then people were willing to meet like the Germans like where they were, and so like because there were like a lot of older people on campus, so sometimes they wouldn't want to sing like a lot of upper beats songs or whatever, like they wanted to sing songs that they knew, but at the same time they were also like, but you're a visitor in our country, and we want you to also feel welcome in like the way that you like, let us learn from you and you learn from us as well. And so, there would be a mix of everything. Like, just like some people would like be getting up to clap and like, wave their hands. Some people would say like hallelujah and amen, like, during the sermons. And people weren't really taken aback by it. Like, they were just kind of like, okay, like we understand now, like this is kind of like, you, and like, we want to also accept that. Also with music too, like, we would sing some hymns here and there, but then also we would be singing, like elevation worship or Hillsong or something, just kind of thing. And it was nice. And what's really cool too is that a lot of these, bands or churches or whatever have like stuff in German. So it was like, oh, like, this song, like let's say Oceans, like I know this, like we have like a version of Oceans on Spotify in German, like, so let's sing that, And like that way they can like personalize it, instead of singing it in English. And like, they're like, yeah, we kind of get it, but like we kind of met them like where they were too in like just different ways. And I thought that was really beautiful because it was like, just really accepting.
I guess proverbially, I would like to ask kind of like one more question. Do you ever feel like, quote unquote, lost in translation? Like did that ever happen to you? And how do you kind of overcome that, that lost in translation phase?
Yeah. I did feel like that quite a bit. Just because if I would say something, let's say in English to like one of my German friends, they speak English, but like, I guess they didn't like formulate the sentence the way that I had said it in their minds. And so sometimes they would answer me and I would say, what? Like, no. Like that's not what I meant, or you know what I mean? And then I would try to say it in German and it was pretty close. And they were like, okay, I see what you're saying. And just like things like that, they were like, oh yeah, okay. Like we have to kind of, keep going and learn more about each other. Like, cause whether it was about culture or about just the language or jokes or anything, there was a lot of things that we were lost in translation about. But I think getting to know each other, like kind of stops that. Like it kind of remedies that situation of being like, okay, like I see how you are. And like, I know, what you mean when you say something or when you do something. And like that kind of fills in the gaps of things that aren't understood at the moment. So anyway.
Awesome. I think that's really good, to hear that there are different ways of approaching it and such. Well, thanks a bunch for being, recorded and for being allowing us to like, have you here and to record you for the podcast and kind of talk a little bit about life abroad and ACA, and that kind of ideology. As it is our tradition, we like to give the final word to our guests. So, I don't know what you want to say about life abroad, but go ahead. You got the final word.
All I would say is just go abroad, learn about a different culture, try to learn a new language. It makes you more well-rounded. It gives you a different perspective of life that you may not see like where you're at comfortably. So go do it.
You've been listening to Disruptive Adventism. We hope that today's topic helped you to think and change something about your practices, about your faith, about your Adventism. If you want to subscribe, make sure to go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll be there. And make sure to give us a review if you like what you're listening to. If you want to support, make sure to go to patreon.com/Disruptive Adventism. It helps us pay our bills and produce the content that you're listening to. And if you want to socialize, make sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram or on Twitter, and hit us up whenever you need anything. We'll be there to support you. Thank you for listening today. We hope you join us next time. And as always, we invite you to be disruptive.